If you've been looking for a church to attend or a ministry to get involved with, we have a very special program for you today. Hello and welcome to Ministry Connections. I am Evangelist Patrick Hoban, the local ministry director here at Salem and AM 980 The Mission. Each week on Ministry Connections, we spotlight a local church or ministry in the Twin Cities area to help you to get to know them a little bit better. If you know of a church or ministry that you would like us to feature, call the station or drop us an email at comments@salemtc.com. You can also follow us on our Facebook or YouTube page. Just look for AM 980 The Mission, and you can watch us on demand. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to my guest, and I would say a friend of mine. His name is Pastor Zach Claussen. He is the campus pastor for Bethel's Rock Church in Farmington. So welcome to the program today, Pastor Zach. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure and a privilege. Now, I've heard your testimony.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty dramatic, but tell the audience a little bit about your story, where you come from, how you came to know the Lord, and then what propelled you into ministry.
Yeah. Great question. My background was raised Christian. Had a great parents who did a good job of introducing me to God. And so I grew up and I had real God experiences. And that led me into high school, and I got into kind of this rebellious stage. And I just made the decision that I wasn't going to follow God, that I was going to do what I wanted to do. And but you still carry with kind of that Christian, culture with you in a way. But it was really more my parents' religion than it was like my own set of beliefs. And so anyways, in high school, started really getting into drinking and drugs, partying. That led me into my first year of college. And I still remember the moment. It was January 1st, 2008, and the night before had been at a New Year's Eve party and had gotten drunk. It's now the next morning, and I'm in the backseat of my friend's car. He's driving us home, and very clearly, I hear God, and he just says, "You're a hypocrite." And just
Wow.
a pause, and I had had enough God experiences to know this was the voice of God without a doubt. And so in the backseat of this car, I just said, "Why am I a hypocrite?" And God says, "You've still been telling everyone that you're a Christian." He's like, "You know that thing that you wear around your neck, that cross necklace, you still wear that, and you tell people you're a Christian, and but he's like, you're not living for me." And he said, I'm gonna give you a simple choice. He said, if you want to keep living the life you're living, I'm not gonna stop you. He said, I've given you free will. I'm not gonna impede on that free will. However, if you're gonna keep living this life, I don't want you to affiliate yourself with me anymore.
Wow.
Or, he said, you can actually follow me. And so it was this weird, I'm in the backseat of this car, and God's given me this very clear ultimatum. And it took me a second. I'm just processing through. And so I just said, "Okay, God, I'll follow you." And that changed everything. I was in Duluth at this point. I was studying civil engineering. Everything to me was math, science, physics, computer science, everything that you could prove. And that was kind of just the way my mind worked. And so, but anyways, I knew that, God was calling me to something different. I got plugged in at a local church, had dramatic spiritual experiences. God was like, "All right, Zach, I'm going to expose you to the spiritual realm, and you're going to start having these experiences, and you're going to recognize that there's a lot of things that math and science can't prove, and it doesn't mean that it's not true. It's just something you don't know how to explain." And so I did one more year at UMD of civil engineering. And I loved the city. I loved Duluth. I loved the university. I loved the nature around North Shore. I go up there often. But there was something in me that just didn't feel like I was supposed to keep doing what I was doing. And so I prayed a simple prayer. I just said, "God, if you want me to do something different, then let me know." And so I started just having this feeling that I was supposed to go and be a pastor. And I had no clue. I was ignorant at this point. I was like, I'm sure pastors go to some kind of school. I don't know what. I'm sure they need some kind of training. And so I said, God, if you want me to be a pastor, I'll go anywhere you want me to go, but you got to make it clear because I don't know what the next step is. And after I prayed that prayer, I began having just a lot of random conversations with people that I knew, and even strangers who were bringing up ministry, and they started talking about this school called North Central University downtown Minneapolis. I had never heard of it before. And finally, the thing that like made it so obvious is I was wearing a UMD sweatshirt. I'm walking on the street. A stranger walks by, and he says, "Oh, are you a student at UMD?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "Have you ever thought about going to North Central University in Minneapolis?" I'm like, "This is just ridiculous." I said, "Well, actually, so I share my whole story, and we end up talking for like 30 minutes."
That led you to the next step to become.
And that led me to the next step. So that, I went there, became a pastor, and now for the last 10, 12 years, I've been pastoring, and I love it. I wouldn't change it or give it up for anything in the world.
Anything in the world. You are listening to Ministry Connections on AM 980 The Mission, where we give you a better look at a local ministry or church. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and X. Just look for AM 980 The Mission. And my guest today is Pastor Zach Claussen of Bethel's Rock, and you can check them out at bethelsrock.org. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, super. Now, I attended the church a couple of times. That's how we met. In actual fact, you were the first pastor that ever visited me when I was laid up with a broken ankle, and I'll never forget it. But I'm sure that there's many stories about Bethel's Rock. Now, you have several campuses.
Yep.
Tell the audience where those campuses are.
Yes, we have a campus in Richfield. We have a campus in Apple Valley, and we have a campus in Farmington, where I'm at. And we pretty recently just planted a church in Cannon Falls, too. So we have one there, and next we're looking to Jordan.
Wow, isn't that something? So I know there's a lot of testimonies, a lot of changed lives. I saw a lot of the stuff that's coming out of especially Cannon Falls of late.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a real life story of somebody, we don't have to mention their name, but a real life story that comes to mind of somebody's life who was changed because of the ministry at one of these locations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's difficult to choose one, but I think of this young couple, and they came, and this was probably about 2 years ago now, and they were interested in church, they believed in God, but they hadn't experienced a direct relationship with God. They hadn't experienced the power of the Holy Spirit, and so they came, and they were at this point living together. They weren't married yet. And so they wanted to go through premarital counseling, which is something that we offer and highly suggest if you're gonna go that route. And so, anyways, the one of the first times I met, I told them, I said, "Do you want to do it your way or do you want to do it God's way?" And they said, "We want to do it God's way." And so we began talking about what that would look like, and the amazing amount of life change in such a small amount of time. I mean, a week later, they were moved out. And they went the right way, and they got super involved in church. I had the privilege to then officiate their wedding a few months later, and then they got married, and then they moved in together, and now they're doing ministry already.
Isn't that something?
I mean, it just is phenomenal just how quickly their lives changed, and they continue to just sacrifice different things for the sake of the gospel. I'm actually going to be going to Nigeria with this couple in a couple of months. We're going to go put a roof on a church, and we're going to do a pastor's conference there.
Wow.
And so I just have so much respect for their willingness to just obey. I mean, they were just like, we want to do it God's way. And and now they've seen the blessing, not only in their lives, but all the people they've been able to impact around them, because they just wanted to obey God and follow him with everything. And so what I love about their story is just like, I planted a seed, I felt like I was obedient with what I needed to do. And then they just took that and they ran with it. And now they're having amazing influence. It's just this multiplication.
Now, I've seen many people get baptized at your church.
Yeah.
So first-time believers, people that didn't know God. Tell us a little bit about that before we close out here today.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're someone you've been sitting on the sidelines, you got to get involved. Jesus refers to the church as his bride, and that's the level of importance. And there's something special and powerful when you are together with other believers. If you're just watching, an online, sermon at home by yourself, you're not the church. You're watching a sermon, you're hearing about God, but there's something powerful of meeting together. And so even this summer, we had an outdoor service at a park in Lakeville. And then we did baptisms after. We had like 15 baptisms.
Wow.
I had the privilege of baptizing my 7-year-old son. But we had a bunch of other people, and there were some decisions that day of just this moment of seeing all these other people saying, yes, I identify with God, and I'm going to get baptized as this public declaration of an inward change. And so I think we had about 10 planned, and then we had about 5 spontaneous. Like they were watching and just saying, I do believe in God. I made this decision, and I need to not be afraid to publicly show.
It's the book of Acts right there in action. I heard the gospel. I want to dedicate my life to Jesus. I want to make a public declaration to the seen and unseen world. I now belong to Christ. You are listening to Ministry Connections on AM 980 The Mission, where we give you a better look at local ministries or churches so that you can know them a little bit better. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube and X. Just look for AM 980 The Mission. My guest today is Pastor Zach Claussen of Bethel's Rock, and you can check them out at bethelsrock.org. Now, I know for sure that part of your ministry that has been very successful in connecting people to Jesus, but also other believers, is your small church ministry, life groups, small groups, whatever you want to call them. Tell us just in the last few moments here how important that is for people to go to these small groups, life groups all across the Twin Cities. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know what I always say is you grow better in circles than rows. There's something great, and powerful when we're there on a Sunday all together. But you don't have the same opportunity to engage. Okay, you're receiving a teaching or a sermon. When you're in a small group, in a life group, like you're in people's homes, you get to engage and tackle with the subject. And so we've got roughly 90 life groups around the Twin Cities, groups for moms, groups for men, groups for young families, seniors groups, all different times. And we're going to be starting a new series here called 7 that's happening, that we're launching in this fall. Talking about the 7 Trojan horses that worked their way into the churches talked about in Revelation. This series was filmed in Turkey. And so if you want to be a part, come to my house. We've got another 89 groups that you can find a time that works. And but it's powerful meeting in groups like that.
And they can find out all about this on your website if they're not connected at bethelsrock.org. Is there any other highlight that you would like to share in the last minute that we have here, Pastor Zach, about your church, what God is doing, anything like that?
The last thing I would just say is we don't operate off of the model of, hey, we've got some great pastors, come look at us. We're all about figuring out what you're passionate about, what God's call is on your life, helping you figure out your spiritual gifts and your purpose, and then trying to help you operate in that and live in that. And so we're not trying to make a name for ourselves. We're not trying to grow into a megachurch. We just want to expand the kingdom of God. We want to spread the gospel, and we know that you are vital to that, and God has given you all sorts of gifts, and we want to tap into those.
Powerful. Thank you for coming in today, Pastor Zach. You can hear Ministry Connections each week on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 1 p.m. Check us out online on Facebook or X or YouTube and just look us up at AM 980 The Mission. And we look forward to hearing from you again.